All right, we are back here getting ready for the baseball season, and there are still COVID considerations to be done, even though the vaccine is starting to roll out very, very slowly around the country. Joining me today, our legal guy, Phil Fraietta, is here to talk about some of these things. Phil, how are you?
I'm doing well, Mike. How are you?
Pretty good. It's nice to see spring training kicking into gear, even though there's still snow on the ground here in New York.
Yeah, nice to see. I saw a couple of photos of the Yankee spring training, and that's always a good feeling for me. You know, it feels like the winter's almost over.
Yeah, I think for me, the one that got a big grin on my face today was they had a picture from Met Camp of Jacob deGrom, like, throwing a bullpen session, and Marcus Stroman was just on a knee with a big grin on his face watching Jake work. I'm like, I just need this in my veins right now.
Yeah, it's awesome. The only negative with spring training is that after a week or two, you're like, all right, just start the season already.
Yeah, it's like once you get that first like exhibition game happening, I think the Yankees is February 28th. I don't know when the Mets is for sure, but like once you get through that first game, okay, give me the real thing. Well, I'm done with this.
Yep, every spring training I watch, maybe the first 5 games at most, and then I'm all right. Let's go. Where's the real game?
Yeah, let's start with the real gains. And before we get to the COVID stuff, I want to catch up on one thing that was sort of happening around the time we talked last, which was the whole Steve Cohen going off a Twitter thing. And we already know about the Robin Hood thing, but he gets in the big feud with Portnoy. Like, as a lawyer, would you say it was probably a good move for him to get off of Twitter considering the road he was going down?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Steve Cohen has no need or reason to be on social media, especially now that, not that he wasn't a public figure before, but he's even more of a public figure now that he owns the Mets. So he's got to get off. I can, do you want me to go into a little bit about what happened in that scenario?
Sure. We catch the audience up a minute.
All right, sure. So this involves the whole GameStop, Reddit, Wall Street thing that I'm sure people read about in the news, but essentially, and I'm trying to make this as simple as possible, and I'm not a money guy, but essentially a bunch of guys on Reddit found out that these hedge funds were shorting the GameStop stock, and shorting is a term for essentially betting against it. So you bet that the stock is going to go down. I don't really understand the mechanics of it, but essentially you bet that the stock's going to go down, and if you're right, you make a lot of money. So these Reddit guys found out that was going on, and they said, hey, you know what? Screw that. These guys are keeping the GameStop price lower than it should be. We're going to buy. And they all just jumped in and started buying small shares, a few $1,000s here or there, but it adds up. And they did it on this app known as Robinhood, which is an app that's marketed for people. Hey, you want to invest in the stock market, but you don't have millions of dollars. Here's a way to do it. So these people were extremely successful. They drove the GameStop price up. I think it was up 600% at one point. It was in like 2 weeks. It was incredible. So with that, these hedge funds who shorted it obviously lost a lot of money. They were betting that it was going to go down, and it went way, way, way up. So then at one point, Robinhood suspended trading of the GameStop stock. They didn't let people buy it anymore. And Dave Portnoy thought that was some sort of a conspiracy with Steve Cohen. And Steve Cohen got involved because I guess the hedge fund who really took a bath was his protege, who started his own fund. And Steve, still has respect for the guy. And apparently Steve Cohen helped bail him out. But Dave Portnoy thought that there was some sort of conspiracy where Robinhood was suspending trading. Turns out that it sounds like Robinhood had no choice based on federal SEC regulations. But long story short, Dave Portnoy thought there was a conspiracy, and him and Steve Cohen got at it on Twitter. Steve Cohen saying it wasn't a conspiracy, Dave saying it was, and just not. I just don't think a good use of Steve Cohen's time to be getting in a Twitter fight with Dave Portnoy.
No, especially when it's basically Twitter, as we learned through the impeachment trial, is basically now is on public record. So like anything Steve Cohen said could have been used against him later on. So like he didn't really do anything wrong here. Like you don't want to be getting in a dispute with Dave Portnoy where Portnoy's going to ask you pointed questions and you could start diving things you don't want to be diving into.
Well, look, I mean, anybody who follows Dave Portnoy, you don't want to get in a fight with Dave Portnoy on the internet ever because he tends to win. But secondly, that is what Dave Portnoy, that's his business, right? His business is to fight people on the internet, cause controversy on the internet. That's not Steve Cohen's business. So Steve Cohen, I think, made a good decision getting away from that. But that whole GameStop thing is extremely interesting. And, I mean, these hedge funds, they took a bath, but we'll see what comes from it. I know that Congress is having a bunch of hearings about it now, talking about potential new regulations because it's pretty amazing how these people were able to organize on Reddit and really drive a stock to crazy, crazy heights.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting problem. Cohen's not involved in directly, but we can skip ahead to the COVID situation now. We had talks earlier about maybe we push the league back, push the month back, and the owners and the players, they sort of had a deal on the table where the owners said, we're going to push the season back a month, we'll play 156 games, we'll pay you for 162. Players end up balking on that. Based on what's been happening the last few weeks, I feel like as a league perspective, I know why it fell through because of the CBA issues. I think this was a mistake to let this sort of happen, especially when we had issues with COVID and distributing the vaccine, and the potential of disruption in spring training is a very big problem.
Yeah, look, I don't think the Players Union made the right decision on that. I think the league's proposal was entirely reasonable. They were going to pay him for the full 162, and I think it was the right thing to do. But this is what we've been discussing on your podcast for over a year now. There is so much distrust between these two sides, and when you come out with stories, like, for instance, Major League Baseball encouraged Maricopa County to say, hey, we're a little worried about this. The Players Union at some point just says, you know what, we don't trust these guys anymore. And I think that's what happened there. I think it was a simple lack of trust. They don't believe that their counterparty is bargaining in good faith anymore.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Now it makes these COVID rules they put in even more important. And we've seen from the NFL and the NBA now that the use of these Connexon tracking devices to sort of determine the close contacts, and that really saved the NFL season because the NFL was going down a bad road before they went to the Connexons with the close contacts to sort of keep it so, okay, we could take the risky players out and then go forward with whoever is still eligible on the roster. And I think now with baseball, I think the big thing we take away from what we've seen so far is that the use of these track devices is going to be the key, keeping this spring training and this season on track and enough players can get vaccinated.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, it shouldn't be that hard if you think about it, right? Because these guys have the capacity to do rapid testing they're still doing it on a daily basis in MLB now, right?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, all right. So you can rapid test on a daily basis. I understand the rapid test is only 80% effective, but 80% is still a pretty damn good percentage when you think about it. So if you couple that with contact tracing, not done by word of mouth, but done by an actual computer. So, if a guy tells you, oh, no, I didn't leave the hotel, but in reality he went to a steakhouse, you're going to know because the computer is going to track him. So when you combine those two things, it really should not be that hard to keep the COVID cases out. Now, a lot of listeners will say, well, if it's so easy, then how come we don't just, open up everything? And the reason why is that, right or wrong, average Joes do not have the money or capacity to do that. But Major League Baseball does. So they can do that, and they should. I think it can work. I think it worked well in the NFL. I think it's a viable strategy so long as you have the economic and political resources to do it, which very few people do, but Major League Baseball does.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the key here because, because the problem last year we ran into its points was we had one guy on the team test positive to shut the team down for a few days, see if it spreads. Now, if player X is wearing his contact tracing device around the clubhouse, it says, oh, he's been around these three guys for the CDC recommended period of their defined as close contact, we can take them out and the rest of the team can play. I think that's how you're going to have to do it in the early going. There might be some occasions where, maybe one day, like, a team is that play 3 minor league outfielders. That's the way it's got to be until people get vaccinated.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Mike, let's just think about this practically, right? If you go to a restaurant right now, if the restaurant could swab everybody and get a result back in 15 minutes, it'd be a very low risk thing to do. And then if they can also contact trace everybody who comes there to make sure they haven't been in contact with anybody who has COVID before they get there, it would work. But, a restaurant doesn't have the capacity to do that. Major League Baseball does. And I think they could use the technology, use the tests, and they can continue to play under those circumstances, I believe.
Yeah, and they also brought in some of the stuff from last year's health and safety protocols. Not the stuff we like. The universal DH is not here, but we have the expansion playoffs is not here either. But we also we have the extra inning rule is back. We have the 7-inning doubleheaders back. What do you think about both of those returning to the mix here?
I hate the extra inning rule. I don't like it, but I think the extra inning rule is here to stay. So I'm going to start with that one. I don't believe them, frankly, that it's a COVID safety thing. I think they like the extra inning rule. I think that I think both sides like it. I think the league likes it because, hey, we're keeping teams don't want. Let's not kid ourselves. Nobody wants to burn out their bullpen. When you burn out your bullpen in a 15-inning game, it affects you for a week. And from the player side, they don't want to get hurt. And when you get in those 15, 16-inning games, inevitably what happens is that you have a guy who normally goes an inning or two at most, and you're asking him to give you 3 or 4. And people get hurt. Or even position players. Position players are conditioned to play 9 innings. Now, all of a sudden, you're talking about 15, 16, 17 innings. You're trying to beat out a double play ball. You pull a hammy. So I just think that that's what's going on with the extra inning rule. I think it's really just a wink and a nod that both sides like it, so they're keeping it. I don't believe them that it's a COVID safety thing, and I think it's here to stay. As far as the 7-inning doubleheaders, I like them. I got to admit, I do. I like them. 7 innings, it's a little weird with the 7 innings, but I think all in all, it gives you an opportunity to watch 2 baseball games, and it doesn't feel like it's forever. Doubleheaders, and I've been to one. I'm one of the guys who did that. I went to, you may remember, but a few years ago, the Yankees played a old-fashioned classic doubleheader against the Blue Jays, and I went to both games. You sat through both games. It's long. It's really long. But 2 7-inning games, I don't know. Maybe it's just the way we're programmed. Doesn't feel that long. So I like it. I'm not sure if that one's here to stay or not, but I think that fans reported to like it.
I think it's different. I feel like the fans who were at the game like it, or who actually would go to a game do like it better than people who are watching on TVs. I feel like, hey, I'm getting gypped in my experience. I want to see 2 9-inning games, which I personally, somebody who has worked those, and independent leagues do use that a lot, and the minor leagues do use them. Like, I see the value of it. My issue is this, especially now that we're going to have fans back in a lot of these parks here. And Rick Cerrone of Baseball Digest pointed out on the podcast last year. You cannot, as a team, I know that these teams like to do the split double headers and get the 2 gates in there. You cannot do split double headers, charge full price for both games. That I have a major problem with.
Yeah, I agree with that. That would not be fair. I mean, look, I don't know why they don't just do it math. Let's just do some math. Yeah. If it was just supposed to be a 9-inning game, well, then it's 7 out of 9. So multiply the fraction by the price. That's what the price would be.
Yeah, it's basically take about a quarter off about the price.
Yeah, and that seems fair to me. I agree with you about that. You can't do it for fans. But I do think from a guy who's watching on TV, it's not bad. It's not bad on a Sunday, have a doubleheader start at, 1 o'clock and both games are wrapped up by dinner time. That's nice.
Yeah, it is nice. And somebody who's worked them, it's like that the games move a lot faster. I know it's not a traditionalist thing to do. I like that aspect, but my thing is I don't trust this league. I'm not concerned with some of these teams. We're recording before a lot of the ticket information has come out. We haven't seen all the prices yet, but it would bother me if, like, you're a team and you're charging full price for a 7-inning game, and that's the issue I'd have.
Lawsuit waiting to happen.
Yeah, I feel like they're smart. They would not change the price a little bit, or just slap them together as one gate, especially when you have a limited amount of fans, not to worry about changing everybody out to COVID.
Swapping them together for one gate is the best way to do it. I agree with you, because then I could say, hey, I'm actually giving you more than 9 innings. I'm giving you 14 innings. You should be paying me more.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the way to do it.
Yeah, I think that is the way to do it. And I think the league also, something interesting is said here is like, oh, here are our protocols. Here's some things. Like, here's how many people you can have at camp. And they announced today, we're recording on Thursday the 18th, that AAA season starting pretty much on time. AA, single A are delayed a month because we have to wait to get the big leaguers out of camp before the minor leaguers come in. They said that right now we're following basically very similar COVID rules to what we had at the end of last year, where you don't leave your hotel room on the road trips unless you get permission to do something from the team. The conditions can be relaxed if appropriate. So how far do you think we're going to have to go before we get a bit of relaxation on the players? And is it like you're getting vaccinated? Is it cases are going down? So do you think is, I know you're not a public health guy, but like logically you think it's more like if COVID improves dramatically, the players will get more freedom.
Yeah, I would say yes, but this is a debate that has been going on now for the past month or so, and there are some people in the have been derogatorily called the forever pandemic group, who just seem to say, this is never going to go away. We have to live like this forever. Then there's people on the other polar side who are, let's go. Now that we vaccinated some people, we're good to go. I don't really know where the happy medium is, but I do know what's going to control it. So I think the big key is once we start vaccinating people, A, do the cases go down? And knock on wood, so far they have. And that's been consistent across the whole country. But B, can the vaccinated people transmit the virus to unvaccinated people? That's a big key. If we determine that they cannot, then we should be able to go a lot faster at getting the entire society, including Major League Baseball, back to normal, so to speak, because you don't have to worry about unvaccinated people. I mean, keep in mind, Mike, that the U.S. population, I think it's about 1/3 children. And you can't vaccinate children right now. So I understand that children are less likely to have COVID and spread it, but that's still a big chunk of the people who we can't vaccinate. And children go to baseball games. So we're going to need to see 10 vaccinated people spread the virus. What I've read so far is that in Israel led the world in vaccine efficiency, and they have vaccinated, I believe, over 80% of their elderly population. And their early data is showing that those people are extremely unlikely to spread the virus to somebody else. So that is a great sign. And I think if that holds, it gets you where you want to be. So I don't know if there's a magic number. I'm sure baseball's epidemiologists do have some magic number where if the positive rate is X, we can relax the restrictions a little bit. But I think that's the key. How fast can we vaccinate people? And once we do vaccinate them, can they spread the virus? And I haven't seen anything from Major League Baseball whether or not they're going to mandate the players to get it. I'm not sure if they've made a decision on that yet, and I'm sure the union wouldn't fight it.
I would think there would have to be collectively bargained, would it not?
Absolutely, yeah. But that's a tough issue for a union, right? Because I don't know what the baseball players union would think, but a lot of unions, the majority of the members are going to say, hell yeah, I want my coworkers vaccinated.
Yeah, and it's also it's different again. This is also an issue where it's sort of like that you wonder if they make up the sport these days, because they see in the NBA where a lot of the players are a bit skeptical about getting the vaccine, because obviously we as a country have not done a good job at doing a good job promoting medical advances to the African American community. Whereas baseball, it's a lot more white players, and they may be more open to it.
Yeah, I don't know how that's going to work, but I think that those are your keys. How many players get vaccinated? Does vaccination country nationwide start reducing cases? And can vaccinated people spread the virus? And if we determine as the early data shows, and I'll stress the word early, but the early data shows that it looks like people cannot or are not transmitting the virus when they're getting vaccinated. So if that holds, then I think baseball will be in a good position to open up. But that's between Major League Baseball and its epidemiologists who know a lot more about this than I do. But I think that's the key. Can we vaccinate people, spread it?
Yeah, I think that is the key to everything. And a couple other things to touch on here before we get into more of the baseball-specific stuff is like the DH expanded playoffs. Like right now we have neither. I mean, it feels like that they're just sort of dancing around each other, the players and the owners, about they all want the expanded DH. The owners are trying to tie it to, we'll trade you this for the expanded playoffs. The players correctly, as they determined, realize, saying, no, this is a bad deal for us because we're going to end up with the DH eventually, but we're not giving the owners like these extra playoffs. They don't have to compete. So do you think we're going to end up with something where we get either this season, neither one of them? What do you think is more likely?
Well, I think you're going to get the expanded DH and not the expanded playoffs. That's my guess. And the only reason I'm saying that is because it makes sense. I've said it on your podcast a million times. I'll say it again. I think it is ridiculous that there's not a universal DH. I think it needs to change immediately. I know the National League, there's still some of those diehards out there. Although I think you're a National League fan, Mike, who's starting to see that the DH isn't so bad.
Now, at this point, you got to kind of see here. It's coming. You could see last year that, as a Met fan, I've been spoiled because I've had good hitting pitchers for years, but, there have been plenty of them who have not hit since high school, and that's not fun to watch.
It's a different base. It's just a different game. It's a much different game when you can pitch around an inning because the pitcher's on deck, so if I walk this guy, it's no big deal. It changes the dynamic of the game, but regardless, I think we all, like you said, the writing's on the wall. The universal DH is coming. Nobody wants to send their pitchers up to bat anymore. Look at what's happened. There's countless examples of pitchers getting hurt when they're batting, and everybody knows it's boring. I'm sorry, it's boring. I know that the baseball purist is going to tell you, but they bunt, and there's a double switch. Let me tell you, Mike, a double switch just means you're changing two people in and out of the game at the same time. Who cares? Yeah, who cares? You watch a basketball game and they take out the center and the power forward at the same time. And you're like, oh my God, he made two people came in the game at the same time? No. In football, how many people run on and off the field every single play? Defense switches into nickel, now they're back in dime. Cornerbacks running all over the place. Nobody cares. So I just don't think the double switch is that great anymore. I think it's enough. It's time to end the pitcher's batting, and I think it's going to happen. But the union has been smart because, as we mentioned on our last podcast, the expanded playoffs is a scam. It is a scam for Major League Baseball and these owners to be able to say, hey, all we got to do is win 82, 83, 84 games, and we have a chance to win the World Series, and our fans are going to keep paying us money. So we don't have to go out and sign Trevor Bauer. We can just, go with Joe Schmo because it doesn't matter. If we win 83 games, we're going to sell out in September because we're in a quote-unquote pennant race. And then we can get swept by the Dodgers in the first round of the playoffs, but nobody's going to care. And the players caught on to that. They realized that's what's going on. So you would counterintuitively think, hey, the players will like extended playoffs because then they have a better chance of playing in the playoffs. But they quickly realized that, wait a minute, these guys are going to use expanded playoffs to justify mediocrity. And that we're not going to allow that. So I think that eventually the owners are going to cave and say, fine, we'll give you the DH without the playoffs. And that's where we're going to end up.
Yeah, I think that would make some sense, especially because a year where you had pitchers trying to make these big jumps from pitching like 50 innings. The leader last year, I think, was 84 innings, going up to 200 potentially, or 160, 170. Don't want to take the added risk of all the NL guys having to hit, or the AL pitchers having to go to NL parks and hit for the first time in 2 years.
That's a great point. And that is a big risk not only to the players, it's a big risk to the owners. I mean, let's take a guy like Garrett Cole. How much money are the Yankees paying him? Imagine he gets hurt. They still got to pay him. So there's no way that they want to risk that. Same thing with the Mets and DeGrom and the Dodgers and Bauer and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I think that the owners are going to say, hey, we got to protect our assets. Let's just suck it up and give them the DH.
Yeah, and before we go the last COVID point, I want to also take a second on the payroll here. I saw a mind-boggling stat the other day that apparently now the Dodgers, they get Trevor Bauer, they give him the big contract, they re-sign Justin Turner. Their payroll is up over $250 million now, which is good for the Dodgers because they're actually spending to try and win. But as of right now, they have spent more money than 5 teams combined. They have $260 million payroll, while the Pirates, Orioles, Indians, Marlins, and Rays combined to pay their players $202 million. That's a big problem for the sport.
We talked about this last time at length, so I'll keep it briefer. But yeah, it's a joke. That's the only word to describe it. It's a joke. And I want to be clear about something because I know that a lot of your listeners are going to think this, and a lot of people on Twitter think this. Oh, the Dodgers, they're greedy. No. We should be applauding the Dodgers. The Dodgers are doing what they should be doing. They're trying to win. They have an owner who is a multi-billionaire and can afford it. And so do all these other teams. The Pirates can afford to buy players. The Orioles can afford to buy players and so on and so forth, but they don't. And it shouldn't be allowed. I really believe baseball needs a salary floor. And I said this last time, if you have to give them the cap to get the floor, then do it. Because the sport is broken. What happened this offseason is proof. And I said it last time, I'll say it again. Trevor Bauer would have helped every single team in Major League Baseball. Yet the only 2 teams who seem to have any interest in him were the Dodgers and the Mets. That's not right. It's just not right. It's a broken system. They got to fix it. And I'll repeat again the other point I made. Masahiro Tanaka decided to pitch in Japan instead of the United States because nobody wanted to pay him. And you can tell me that Tanaka is not an ace, that he's not the best, and that's fine. I'll agree with you. But how many teams in baseball would benefit from having Tanaka on their staff? 25, 28?
Sounds about right.
Maybe even all 30. Is there a single team who you could say definitively has 5 pitchers better than Masahiro Tanaka on their team?
No.
No. And yet the guy has to go to Japan. It's a joke. Baseball needs to fix it. These owners are colluding against the players. So I applaud the Dodgers. Good for them. I'm happy they spent money. I'm happy the Mets spent money. I wish more teams would.
I also think something that's telling about the way the story is right now is, I don't know if you saw the baseball prospectus odds to the teams to make the playoffs this year. They put them out a couple of days ago. They went through all 30 teams. They gave the Baltimore Orioles a 0.0% chance of reaching the postseason. And this is before pitchers and catchers even report. So they basically tell you, Oriole fans, don't bother watching the season. We don't even think there's any mathematical scenario you can make the postseason.
Yep. And don't forget the ripple effect of that, Mike. Because when the Orioles have, if you look at who's on the top of that list, it's the Yankees. And there's a ripple effect there. Because I think the Yankees were the highest percentage in the American League, if I'm not mistaken. And I think it was by a lot.
Yeah, I think it was like 91% or something like that.
So the Yankees know that. Now, they don't know what baseball prospectus' numbers are, but don't kid yourselves. They do that themselves. And they say, who do we compete with in our division? Oh, we're going to win the division. So why would we go out and, we don't need Trevor Bauer. We're going to win. We don't need him. And so it has a ripple effect. Not only are the Orioles terrible, but the other teams in their division, like the Yankees, can be a little bit cheaper on the margin because they know that they're going to win a division anyway. And then they're going to go with the same, which is true in my opinion, but the same argument. If they go to the playoffs and they get knocked out in the first round, they're going to say, yeah, it's short series. It's crapshoot. What are you going to do?
Yeah, that's certainly a big problem around the sport. And I think one problem that is potentially an issue, something the NBA is running into right now, is that as of right now, because they didn't take the deal from the owners, the players said, we're going to stick to our originally planned schedule, which is a full 162. We're flying all over the country. We have games on the West Coast. We have East Coast teams flying west. And the issue with this is, if the normal calendar baked in, it's not a problem. But, if you have a COVID spot here where maybe one team has an outbreak and they can't play, and let's say the Marlins got unlucky again, they have an outbreak and they're on the West Coast, rescheduling those games would be a pain in the neck.
You're probably going to have to do what happened in the NFL, where, the Denver Broncos essentially played a game without a quarterback. And you're probably just going to have to say, we're going to have to figure it out. You have minor league teams, call up some kid from single A and let him pitch. And it would be a disaster, but I don't think they have much of a choice because of what you said. You can't, the travel makes it hard. Last year they were able to just see them because there wasn't much travel. Cross country travel is going to make this impossible. So you're not going to be able to say, oh, there was a COVID test, game's canceled. You're going to have to say, all right, COVID test, find somebody else, find a kid in the minor league, get him on the mound.
I think that's why the 7-inning doubleheaders are here, because they might say, okay, we might not have enough today, but we'll have to get some guys in the minors to play 2 tomorrow.
Yep, and you might see a lot of kids who otherwise would never be in the major league up there, and they may. And if it gets bad enough, don't be surprised if they relax the 40-man roster rule.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see what happens there. Although the hope for baseball is maybe you have a rough April and May, but as more vaccines get into arms, you got to feel like also that the government may also help Major League Baseball out, because they may see this as an opportunity to say, hey, look, let's use baseball players as a public example to build vaccine confidence in the public who is a little questioning about it, and say, hey, like, if Justin Turner or Mike Trout gets their vaccine on camera, maybe we'll convince people to do it. So they figure, okay, we will have to go through one rough month, and once we get our shots, and when General Pop comes eligible, maybe they get pushed to the front of the line, which I think MLB sort of banking. I think that's what they're hoping for.
Maybe. I could see it. Look, the vaccine rollout is a complicated issue because it's the federal government, but it involves state governments and how the state governments are going to prioritize it. So as I'm sure the listeners of this podcast know, all of a sudden New York says, okay, now anybody with a comorbidity can go get it. Except that if you look at the list of underlying conditions, it's essentially anybody who's ever been sick. It's so long. So that's one state. Then you got another state like Connecticut where they're saying, no, the old people. Some states are letting teachers get it. Other states aren't letting teachers get it. Some states have first responders. Some states have people like your situation with your job. It's super complicated. So can the federal government preempt all that and say, yeah, we're just going to take control and we're going to vaccinate Major League Baseball? Yes. But do you think that's a good PR move? And that could really backfire on the federal government.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying to say do it right now. I feel like once you get to the point where you're comfortable, where you say, okay, we've done enough of these other groups and we're going to go to Gen Pop. I think at that point, that's when you're going to say, okay, maybe we'll push Major League Baseball up a bit to sort of convince people around the fence to get the vaccine.
I could see that, but that could be June or July.
Yeah.
We just don't know yet. I know that the predictions have varied. I saw Fauci had pushed his May prediction back to July. And I get that a big part of it is Johnson & Johnson. As I understand it, their vaccine's up for approval, if not this week, then next week. It's coming close. So that will be a big boost once you get a third vaccine on the market. But yeah, I could see that. But baseball is going to have a rough first half of the year. Although I think they got some surprisingly good news that Governor Cuomo is going to let some fans in the stadium.
Yeah, that was a big shock when it came out last week. I know they'd done the playoff games of the Bills. They started using the test cases, and now we've seen this where starting next week, we're going to have starting this weekend as of you're listening to this, the Brooklyn Nets, the New York Knicks, the Rangers, they're going to let about 20%, at 10% in most of the fans in the buildings. So that's about 2,000 at the Garden. The Nets are starting with 200. And I think it's going to be interesting because the Knicks have dropped their prices. They said, $50 to get in and up to $380. And I think good job by the Knicks there, because I'd heard rumors about maybe the Nets are going to try and bilk the price a little bit, try and get some money back. So I think all things considered, it's not a bad pricing market for the Knicks.
No, it's surprising and it's fair, but yeah, they can gouge the hell out of these prices. Because look, COVID is very serious, and anybody who tells you it's not, just show them the death count. I think we lost more Americans than we did in World War I and World War II combined. It's a lot of people who have died. But that said, there are a lot. There are a lot of people who are in very low risk groups. So I just don't believe that there's not 2,000 people in New York State who said, "Yeah, I'll go to the Nets game. I'll pay for that," and people will pay for it. So, essentially, what I'm trying to say is that there's going to be high demand. Yes, it's going to be somewhat weakened by people who are afraid or fearful of getting sick. But there'll be a lot of people who are like, "Yeah, I'll go," and I think they could gouge the hell out of the prices. So, good job by the Knicks not doing that. And I hope a lot of teams don't do that. Because, it's
a lot of people still
not right.
A lot of people still have economic issues. A lot of people are lost a lot of work. A lot of people don't have the same amount of income as they had a couple years ago. And it would be like a greedy move to say, hey, like, I lost my money. I'm going to charge more and make up some of the profits I'm losing by not having games without fans until now.
I agree. I agree with you. And I think they could get away with it. Because while you're right that a lot of people lost money, there's plenty of other people who didn't. And, people who maybe, have some sort of remote working from home type job, didn't really lose that much money. And they're like, yeah, I'll drop $2,000 to go watch the Nets today. I don't care. Can't have that. So I think it's a good job of the Nets. This is a little different than you get into the price debate all the time. Oh, should you price gouge when there's a disaster over bottles of water and gas? And that's a whole different issue. But here you're talking about basketball games. You don't need to distribute water to everybody or basketball games to everybody. So good job by the Knicks saying, you know what, we're going to keep it equitable anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think this is sort of a guideline. I think we just need to see if more states adopt this. Like, okay, like, here you go. Like, you have to you show up, you wear your mask to the game. You have to register a negative PCR COVID test. So I know the Knicks, I was reading their release earlier, they have like partnered with Northwell Health here in New York where they can set you up to register for an appointment so you get in on time. I think that's sort of the way they're going to look at it, sort of reduce liability. Say, hey, like, we tested everyone on the way in and they all showed up negative. So, like, if something happens, we have info. We're keeping them to their pod so we can limit spread. I think it's going to start out small like this. What do you think about the PCR test?
I like it. I don't see why not. Why not take that extra level of precaution? I mean, they're free as far as I know. So you don't have to pay for it. So you know what? Yeah, it's an extra layer. It's an extra burden. But again, people will do it. There'll get enough people who will say, yeah, all right, fine, I'll go get tested.
Yeah.
To go to the basketball game.
Yeah, because now people are just tired of sitting in their house and they say, okay, take a test and wear a mask. You can go watch the Nets play and see the big three for the first time. And you say, sure, I'll do it.
Yeah, and why not? Why not take that extra level of precaution? It's not a huge invasive thing. I mean, I don't know. I've been tested for COVID before. They swab your nose, you don't even feel it anymore. It's not like you saw a year ago when they're sticking the thing all the way up to your brain. They don't do that anymore. So why not? I'm fine with that. I think it's a good idea. And you're right. If in the event of a lawsuit, that'd be good evidence for the defense. To say, hey, look, we tested every single person.
Yeah, they came in negative. Like they have, like that's not a responsibility what happens 2 days after they leave the state and they test positive.
Yeah, right. We made sure that everybody in there was negative and wore their mask. So it's not our fault. So yeah, that's good defense. I like it. I'm fine with it. I'm actually surprised that it hasn't taken off more. I thought that airlines would require it, and they haven't. They've actually fought against it, and I'm surprised by that.
Yeah, I think personally, this is my opinion, I think it's going to be how we start out. I feel like as more people getting vaccinated, I think there will be a point, especially if you're right about the transmissibility thing and that the research in Israel proves that people who are vaccinated for this disease do not have the ability to transmit it, even if they've come into contact with someone who has it. You may see a point where, like, if you're vaccinated and you have the little card with you that shows you got the shots, you flash that, and then that's your way in instead of getting the PCR test. I feel like that's eventually what's going to happen.
Yeah, I agree. But I do want to clarify something just because I don't want to get anybody's hopes up. The research in Israel did not prove that you cannot transmit the disease. So I want to rephrase that. Early data shows that you're about 90% less likely. So it's not impossible, but it was 90% less likely to do so. And it's preliminary data. That's what I read. But, that's, if you think of, let's do the math. If the vaccine's 95% effective, then you already only have a 5% chance of even getting sick in the first place. And now if you're telling me that you only have a 10% chance or a 90% less likely chance than normal, rather, of transmitting it, you start adding the percentages together and you're talking about low odds. So it's good data. It's early data. It doesn't prove it, and it doesn't prove it's impossible, but it's a good start.
It is a good start. And it's something where, like, especially, like, it's one where I want to sort of see how they play this out and see, like, what the numbers are in the community, like how the spread goes down. Sort of like all factors you have to weigh into yourself. It's like you have to, especially like while you're waiting for the shot, you say weigh all these things. You decide, do I want to go to the ballpark today, or like, do I have time to stop and get the PCR test today? Like if I'm working, like those things you got to weigh in now.
Yeah, but you know what? It's a start, and let's just hope that come the All-Star break or a little bit after, we can be talking about a normal or relatively normal baseball season.
Yeah, that would be the hope, because I mean, I feel like that the way that it sounds like, and again, these numbers change all the time based on when the vaccines are dropping. I think my hunch is that like we're going to start out about 10% of crowds. If the case numbers keep dropping and the variants of the disease don't take off and stuff like that, I feel like we're going to get a point where, maybe you're at like 25% by Memorial Day. I feel like by the end of the season, it's just, and ideally for the owners, by the playoffs, and you're able to get like a much closer to full crowds than you are at the start.
I agree with you, and I hope that that's the case. And, I'm sure we're going to do baseball preview and over-under at some point, but I will say that it looks like right now, it's early, hopefully nobody gets hurt, but right now I think we're in for a really good baseball season here in New York.
Yeah,
I think we've got two very good teams.
I also hope that like it's only 5 playoff teams. I feel like the intrigue is much higher if it's 5 as opposed to 7.
I agree. I hope that's the case too. I think we're going to have a great season. I think we got 2 really good teams. Right now, I say the Yankees are the best team in the American League, and I say the Mets are the second best team in the National League.
Yeah.
So I think we got good teams. So I'm hoping that we get a nice New York baseball summer.
It'll be a lot of fun. Phil, thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you having me on again. And, hopefully this information is helpful to people. But keep reading up about it. That's what I'd urge people to do. Read up about it. Read whatever you can, and go get your shot when you're eligible.
Follow the science. That's what we're trying to say here.
Yeah, that's as Andrew Cuomo likes to say.
Yeah, well, let's not talk too much about Governor Cuomo. He had some issues away from the COVID stuff, but
he did. He had a rough couple of weeks, but yeah, get your shot. It's annoying. It's a process, but we're all going to be better off for it.
We will, and I will also ask before I let you go, have you heard about the CC Sabathia documentary on HBO Max?
I have not. What is it? Tell me about it. I actually just kind of got into HBO Max recently. I know it came out a while ago, but I never really got into it. But I recently just kind of opened it and realized, oh my God, they have a huge content library. So what's this documentary?
Well, it's a documentary on basically follows CC through his last season with the Yankees, goes through his career, goes through his bouts with alcoholism. I think it's a great watch. I'm going to take a deeper dive into it with Alan Austin next on the podcast right after this.